guest for this segment of Accent is Charlene Herring, greenhouse manager from the Tallahassee nurseries. And as you can see, we have all these lovely ferns here to talk about. Welcome to the program, Charlene. First of all, I've got to ask you this question since I'm not that up on my plants, and I'm sure you're up on yours. What separates the ferns from other plants?
Well, a fern never produces flowers, and it never produces seeds. It produces spores, which is how it completes its reproductive cycle. And that's what separates.
Okay, and what are the basic care requirements of ferns? I know every time you run into a lady in a plant store, she seems to know all the answers to that, but I don't. So what are the basic care requirements?
Well, ferns are considered basically shade plants. So outside you would want to plant them in a shady area or high shifting sun, or either early morning sun, late afternoon, not the hot midday sun. Indoors, you could locate them in front of a north window, east window, west window, or across from a south window. If you have a lot of trees or anything outside your north window, you may find it better to put them in front of an east or west window. And humidity is probably the most important factor in growing ferns. They like a higher humidity than most of your plants, usually 50% or more. There are several ways in which you can raise the humidity, either by grouping the plants together, placing them on humidity trays, misting them, placing a humidifier in the room with them, or either lower your thermostat a little bit.
Okay, let me ask you this. A humidity tray, is that something you can buy?
You can buy them, or you can put one together fairly easy. You just need a shallow type of pan, something like that, which will hold water, and you put rocks in the bottom of it, and you put your water just below your pebble line, and then place your plants directly on top of that, so that they're not sitting in the water, they're just above it. And as the water evaporates up, it raises the humidity.
Okay, if you were to buy a humidity tray, what would something like that cost?
Depending on what you use, I don't know of any commercial humidity tray that you can buy, but you can, out of the grocery store, you could buy the little aluminum, like roasting pans or anything like that, the little metal baking pans, anything like that.
But at any rate, it shouldn't cost much, right?
Right, right.
Okay. And are insects a problem with ferns or not?
Not usually. Probably the biggest problem would be scale. And mealybugs would probably be the next. I've never had a lot of trouble with mealybugs. Scale I have had. The scale should not be confused with spores. Your spores will usually show in a definite pattern on the undersides of your leaves, which is where your scale also usually appears. But your scale will usually stay along the midrib. And usually, like if you treat them with systemic insecticides such as isotox at half strength, that'll usually take care of it.
Okay. Can you point out some of the various ferns we have here on this tray, for instance?
Okay. Well, this is a maidenhair fern. It's a very light, delicate-looking fern. This can be grown indoors or outdoors. This indoors, it's usually a little harder to grow because it is one that prefers a higher humidity on it. This is a Boston compacta fern, which is a mutant, really, off of the original sword fern, which are all your Boston, your petticoats, your fishtails, all of those are mutants from the original sword fern. And the fronds don't get as long on it, it just stays more compact. It is an easier house fern to grow. This one is your...
That's cute.
This is your button fern. This one is one that you can allow to dry out a little easier. It's an easy fern to grow, takes a little less humidity, so it's a good indoor fern, especially for a beginner.
Well, that's me, a beginner, I'll tell you.
This is one of your terrace ferns. There's many types of terrace ferns, but there are all of these ferns. This is another easy one, can take less humidity. It makes a nice table fern. They're commonly referred to as table ferns a lot. And this last one is what's called your fluffy duffy fern. Again, it's a sport off of your Boston ferns.
That's called what now?
A fluffy duffy fern.
Oh, love it. I got two of those right now.
It's a really nice fern. That's a favorite, it seems to be.
Okay, for a beginner such as myself, now you mentioned one fern here. Are there a couple others that we should make the viewers aware of that might not be on the tray here that would be easy ferns to begin with?
Right, your holly fern, which is to your right there. That's that's an easy one, and that's a good one to plant outdoors too. It is hardy. A severe frost would probably burn the foliage back a little bit, but it should come back in the spring. But that can be grown indoors or out, and it's an easy fern to grow.
Okay. Now, speaking about spring, and of course sooner or later winter's going to arrive, are there any ferns that I could plant outside that will withstand the winter?
Sure. Your leatherleaf fern over here is probably more common in central Florida, where it's grown commercially and shipped to florists and all. You'll find that one in your floral arrangements a lot, but it can be grown outdoors. Again, your holly fern is another one, and a lot of your maidenhairs.
Okay, how did you get into this business? Did it start out as a hobby with you, or what?
Yes, it did. I started out just, I wanted a little bit of green around my house, so I picked up a few plants, and then I just kind of got the bug and just kept adding and adding to my collections, and I decided to go to school in horticulture. So I went out to Lively and took the horticulture program, and I completed that, and then I started working at Tallahassee Nurseries, and I've been there for almost 3 years.
Well, speaking of having gone to school, are you aware of any particular course, maybe, that somebody could take that just wants to add to their already interest in ferns or in plants in general?
Lively has a very good course. They did have a day course for people that were serious into going into horticulture as a business. And they also had a night course that used to be for people that were more interested in it as a hobby. Now, I'm not sure if they are continuing that program or not, the night program.
Okay, you mentioned you keep adding to your collection and adding to your collection. I just envision your place just loaded with plants. Is that the way it is?
Pretty much.
Okay. And do I gather that you have to have a high humidity for most ferns, or is that wrong?
Well, most of your ferns, yes, like a higher humidity. Now, there are a few, like the button fern, the bird's nest fern, that can take a lower humidity and usually don't require as much water.
Can you give me maybe an estimated number of how many plants at your house?
At my house, I would, just estimating, I would say I have probably 200 to 300.
Wow.
Just
You have to go
estimating.
around and water those?
Yeah.
How often?
Well, I have most of them outside right now. I have a lot of trees, so I have them under the trees. So we usually just, if the rains don't come, we put the sprinkler on them. So I have that kind of easy. The ones up on my deck, some of them I have to water every day. Some of them I can get by with every 2 or 3 days.
Okay, I'm going to ask you your fatality rate on ferns. Have you lost any, or have you always been able to bring them back to life if they kind of wilt or whatever?
Well, of course I've lost some. I think I've got a pretty good rating on them. It's a lot easier, one thing to remember, it's a lot easier to bring back fern or any plant, for that matter, that has been underwatered rather than overwatered. And just when you water a fern, just be sure to let the water go all the way through so you know you soak the whole root ball real good. And rather than just letting one stream of water work a hole into the fern, spread your water out so you get an even